Fellas, we have seen revamps year after year of pretty much everything. Hell, if you go all the way back to the beginning of Destiny 2, we went from a double primary system with static roles to then random roles. Artifacts weren't even a thing. Champions weren't even a thing. And since the inception of Destiny, we have seen major overhauls to pretty much everything. From overhauls to our armor, to our weapons, hell, weapons 3.0, weapon crafting, hell, even subclass 3.0. But recently, there has been some debates about power creep inside of Destiny. Essentially, as Guardians, we have become too strong, most notably inside of PvE. Now, Bungie's way of correcting this was, of course, the Witch Queen campaign, where they added legendary difficulty. But again, this is just a way in which adds are a little beefier, hit a little bit harder, but nothing really changes about them dynamically, which is why we wanted to talk about the topic today surrounding a Combatants 3.0. Nah. Cross, this sounds really elitist of you to say we need to have harder enemies in the game, but hear me out. This is not harder in the sense that you think of, where I'm just gonna go, hey, our weapons do half the damage, the bosses are twice the health, everything hits a lot harder, and essentially, we're operating under-leveled at all times. We see this with Grandmasters, but Grandmasters themselves have become stale. The main thing that Grandmasters presents over other Nightfalls is that, well, you're constantly under-leveled, and you have more champions to deal with, but nothing else really dynamically changes here. The combatants themselves aren't smarter, aren't more agile, aren't more challenging, and if we were going into Destiny 3, this is the kind of update that I would expect for our combatants in our AI, but we're not. We're sticking with Destiny 2, considering the Lightfall expansion, the final shape, and Bungie has many more years afterwards where they're going to continually keep updating Destiny 2. Overhauls to our combatants, which would be even bigger than a subclass 3.0 or weapons 3.0 overhaul. That right there has got to happen. Brought up this past weekend by my friend Kujay. He stated that subclass 3.0, weapons 3.0, resilient buff, exotic primary buff, the amount of power we received since Witch Queen has been insane. I think it's time that Bungie evens the playing field. The great Uno reverse card, if you will, we need a Combatants 3.0. He goes on to say that when I say Combatants 3.0, I mean a wholesale revamp to our PvE enemies. We need dynamic enemy AI that makes them more accurate and more evasive in higher difficulty settings. We need more threatening, non-champion enemies like Wyverns and Hive Guardians. We need a challenge. The amount of power and complex builds that we now have is amazing, and it would get even crazier in the future if Bungie introduces cross-elemental effects. By the way, that's a prediction of ours. We actually think that final shape may give us the opportunity to actually merge our subclasses. Again, tinfoil hats, we'll see. But our PvE foes need to rise to the might of our new powers. Till then, things will remain boring and stale. Look guys, this is the truth for PvE players. And listen, I like optimizing things inside of Grandmasters, inside of raids, but we have to admit, for the past couple seasons, dude, I'm just running around throwing grenades and letting it do all the work for me. I remember at one point, Grandmasters, you had to have an Ursa Furiosa on your team just to make it through the content. You remember hard mode Menagerie? You couldn't even make it through the boss phase without an Ursa Furiosa. And Ursa Furiosa had actually been nerfed then, but because of the sheer amount of damage that it was blocking inside of Grandmasters in those harder content, you were able to get your super back so fast. Now this actually began based on a thread from Glad, and it was this take on D2 PvE. And he said that much of the skill mastery and execution demand has slipped from the game and its players. The game relies very heavily on broken, power crept builds with required mods. Builds 3.0, crafting have increased ease to access, but crushed skill gap and challenge. It goes on to state, if we look at a very specific area, PvE in-game challenges and low mans, we can see this in full effect. Once these feats required careful planning, execution, skill, and mastery to complete, now many, not all, are completed with busted ass builds and cheeses that do the work. As much as I anticipated a build system in the game when it was first toyed with, I didn't expect it to go this far into the crutch realm. 3.0 subclasses and weapon crafting didn't help that either. These things are all a blessing and a curse. Like I said, guys, we're at that point. We're in the single activity. All I have to do is just pop my class ability and throw a grenade. Now here's the thing. We could go out there and just nerf everything in the ground. Heart of Inmost Light, you can kill it with fire. And we've seen this happen time and time again. From the Anarchy nerf, to the Lorely nerf, to the original Xenophage nerf. But Kujay actually made an excellent point though. The same problem that has plagued PvP for years has finally come home to roost in PvE as well. That being, gear gap is greater than skill gap. AKA, the power difference between the best and worst loadouts is vastly more impactful than the player skill differences between good and bad players. That is really Destiny in a nutshell. You want to know what decides whether or not you're a good player in Destiny? It's your ability to optimize your gear sets. Really. It's the reason why our build videos do as well as they do, amongst other content creators out there that put out build videos. Builds make all the difference. And by God, have they actually changed year over year. Because in the beginning, a build literally consisted of an exotic weapon, an exotic armor piece, and whatever subclass node Bungie gave you. And again, those were very much dedicated to whatever it is that were in those subclass nodes. You didn't have the option to customize things. If you want a melting point, aka hammer strike, applied to an enemy, you had to rock Top Tree Sunbreaker, which really sucks because who wouldn't want to rock Hammer Strike with Sunspots? Bungie's solution though? Remove the debuff. Why Bungie? It's because Bungie is looking for ways to mitigate power creep, and that is one of the ways. Plus, class identity. We recently talked about Subclass 3.0. We're actually going to have a follow-up video on this topic because there are some other abilities that I wanted to bring up. But yes, various nerfs and removals of certain abilities from our previous subclasses were put in place because of class identity. Regardless though, a Combatants 3.0. This is where you start to get the divide in the community because there are players that are just scooting past the finish line in Grandmaster content, and they're going to be sitting there with the Pikachu face asking, what the hell? Why are we amplifying difficulty in Destiny when I'm barely getting through this stuff? And here we are as elitists saying we need it to be harder. I do think that a Combatants 3.0 is necessary, and hence why Bungie introduced the legendary campaign mode starting in Witch Queen, and that's going to become a regular thing throughout Destiny's lifespan. But it's not going to be enough because overall, AI has not evolved over the years. They're still the same. You still got that Dreg that creeps out, shoots a couple shots at you, that barely even hits you, and with 100 resilience, barely even hurts you, and then peeks back in the cover. Simultaneously, you go inside of a Grandmaster, and he can instantly melt you. Problem is now, is you're not necessarily rewarded for suddenly landing a headshot on that Dreg. Instead, you just throw a grenade, or cast an ability, or drop a Witherhoard shot. Please, Bungie, don't nerf Witherhoard. I love Witherhoard. I'm not asking for that, but you see the issue here. I, too, am stuck between a rock and a hard place because I like the builds. I like feeling this powerful, but I have to agree. All scales of the game, from the most basic AI all the way up to GMs, we need an overhaul to Combatants. That is what's going to really separate things. Now, Bungie has actually been fixing this in some of our activities. Notice things like enemy density, Grasp of Avarice is a good example. Even our 6-player activities in a given season are better than that. Bungie's answer to this is say, hey, we can't necessarily make AI more strategic, but we can just make them pour out non-stop, which will combat the stupid overpowered builds everyone's rocking. That's a solution, but again, a temporary one. On top of that, if you just keep amplifying enemy count over and over again with the expectation everyone has the proper builds to combatant, what about the new player that's just now joining Destiny who doesn't have access to all of the combat mods? That is a huge problem right now. You have to literally sit around and wait for these to come up in rotation with Ada. And we made an entire video on mods and where to get them. But the whole point of that video is to say, hey, we just need an open store for everyone to have access to these mods. The problem with that is, of course, that does contribute to everyone rocking overpowered builds. Guys, I want to make a suggestion right now, and it's actually a double-pronged suggestion. A Combatants 3.0 is necessary. Absolutely. Needs to happen. AI needs to be updated. They need to be more intelligent. They need to go for flanks. Bungie really needs to heavily invest in that dynamic enemy AI and lean into enemies outside of just champions. I think Wyverns are a fantastic example of this. They are more difficult to me than an Overload champion. I am more scared when a Wyvern shows up. Hive Guardians is another example. Those are, in my opinion, dynamic enemies. It's not just the normal ogre that sits there and tries to blast you, or that thrall that constantly keeps charging you. It's new enemies. Genuinely, even though it's the same, it's new. I know Wyverns are essentially just Vex, but it's new. Hive Guardians are essentially Hive, but still new. We need more new enemies that know how to challenge us on the battlefield and not just have enemy density increase. The other thing that I want to suggest to appeal to the elites of Destiny, the folks that just want to get out there and take on the hardest of the hard, is to introduce an Iron Man mode in Destiny 2. For those not familiar, Iron Man mode and other games, most notably RuneScape, really puts your player to the test. It requires you to earn everything yourself, and you are not allowed to take advantage of things like the Grand Exchange, no XP handouts, no trade. Everything that you get is through crafting, questing, or killing the nastiest of the nasty inside of RuneScape. And RuneScape actually goes a step further, where they actually have hardcore Iron Man, that if you die, you die. Now, I've done Iron Man mode. The beautiful thing about Iron Man mode is you have like this icon next to your name that showcases how much of a beast you are. It's really, really cool. Everyone in every game likes to flex. And if you had an Iron Man mode inside of Destiny 2, with say an emblem that goes along with it that updates as you progress through the game, this would be something for everyone to flex, especially the elite players. Imagine having an Iron Man mode inside of Destiny 2, where you were not allowed to buy anything in-game. Everything had to be obtained. All the materials, exotics had to drop. No, you can't even take an exotic cipher and go buy them from the store. And I know someone's going to bring up Cross. That's the only way to get them. Bungie, make it work. Make it where it's drops only. And even have a hardcore mode that if you die inside of Destiny 2, that's it. You lose your character. You lose all the gear you obtain on that character. Everything in the game goes in a single death. But Cross, that sounds really toxic, especially if you make combatants even stronger. What are you trying to do? I'm trying to give the elites something to really munch on. Something that they can really chew on for like the next decade. Because if you think you're going to be able to breeze through Destiny 2 without dying once, bruh, have you met the architects? Fall damage can get you out of nowhere, and suddenly you lose everything. Listen, guys, for those that are part of the elites of Destiny, this is it. This is your challenge. I do agree that we need a Combatants 3.0, but at the same time, we're going to continue returning to this argument over and over again again until you give the sweatiest of the sweat something to really challenge them. And that right there would challenge the hell out of them. Make every item in the game only earnable via drops. Make every material in the game only earnable without purchasing them, and lock them from ever being able to buy things from the season pass, from vendors, no bounties. All XP has to be earned, and when they die, they die. Character gone. That is my suggestion, fellas. Take it or leave it. But in my opinion, this is the only way we will ever obtain parity in Destiny. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.